I promised you, one final note on my whole libertarian rant here. There are arguably a couple of founders of the Libertarian Party. The original Libertarian Party was called FEE, and this was back in the 40s, and it was a business group that put together a sort of political party to put a patina, a business-friendly patina, on pro-business policies. And this, morphed into the Libertarian Party through the 40s and 50s, and by the 70s was, a full-blown thing where billionaires and corporations were finding useful idiots to promote their talking points that I, me, mine. How dare government tell me what to do with my body? How dare government tell me, take my money away from me in the form of taxes? How dare government offer me free public roads and free public schools? I mean, that's collectivism. And, there are two intellectual godfathers, or in one case, godmothers, to the libertarian movement. And one of them is Ayn Rand, and the other, of course, is FEE, is the old, these various business groups, including the Chamber of Commerce, that created the Libertarian Party basically to shill for big business and billionaires. And Ayn Rand, I talked yesterday about, I called him William Hickok. It's Hickman, William Edward Hickman. And Michael Prescott did a great piece on this, the New York Times best-selling writer. It's michaelprescott.freeservers.com/romancing-the-stone-cold. It's titled Romancing the Stone Cold Killer, Ayn Rand and William Hickman. And he notes, in her journal circa 1928, Rand quoted the statement, "What is good for me is right." What is good for me is right. Now, where did this come from? It's a statement she lifted from a newspaper story about a guy by the name of William Edward Hickman. So, and in fact, she was very enthusiastic about this in her on page 21 of her journal, Journals of Ayn Rand. She said, quote, "The best and strongest expression," is speaking of Hickman, "that he is the best and strongest expression of a real man's psychology I have heard." She was planning a novel at that time, and she wanted her ideal man to be the hero of the novel. She said he is, and so she decided to model him after William Edward Hickman. And of Hickman, she said, "He is born with a wonderful, free, light consciousness resulting from the absolute lack of social instinct or herd feeling he does not understand because he has no organ for understanding the necessity, meaning, or importance of other people. Other people do not exist for him, and he does not understand why they should." So who is Wayne Edward Hickman? Well, as Michael Prescott writes, in December of 1927, Hickman, 19 years old, showed up at a Los Angeles public school and managed to get custody of a 12-year-old girl, Marion Parker. He was able to convince Marion's teacher that the girl's father, a well-known local banker, had been seriously injured in a car accident, and the girl had to go to the hospital immediately. The story was a lie. Hickman disappeared with Marion, and over the next few years, Mr. and Mrs. Parker received a series of ransom notes. The notes were cruel and taunting and were sometimes signed death or fate. The sum of $1,500 was demanded for the child's safe release. Hickman, by the way, said he needed the sum to go to Bible college. The father raised the payment in gold certificates and delivered it to Hickman. And then this is an article titled Fate, Death, and the Fox in crimelibrary.com. Quoting from that article, quote, "At the rendezvous, Mr. Parker handed over the money to a young man who was waiting for him in a parked car. When Mr. Parker paid the ransom, he could see his daughter, Marion, sitting in the passenger seat next to the suspect. As soon as the money was exchanged, the suspect drove off with the victim still in the car. At the end of the street, Marion's corpse was dumped onto the pavement. She was dead. Her legs had been chopped off. Her eyes had been wired open to appear as if she was still alive. Her internal organs had been cut out, and pieces of her body were later found strewn all over the Los Angeles area. He cut the girl's body in half, severed her hands, drained her torso of blood, and stuffed it with bath towels. When he was finally arrested, quote, he was conveyed back to Los Angeles, where he promptly confessed to another murder he committed during a drugstore holdup. Eventually, Hickman confessed to a dozen armed robberies. And he told investigators about this 12-year-old girl that he murdered He said, Marion and I were good friends, and we really had a good time when we were together, and I really liked her. I'm sorry that she was killed. So speaking of this article about this guy, Ayn Rand, in her journal, on page 78 in her journal, she was talking about, this is in her early notes for her novel, The Fountainhead, and she's talking about William Edward Hickman as, you know, a model for this. She says, one puts oneself above all and crushes everything in one's way to get the best for oneself. Fine! Exclamation mark. Speaking of The Fountainhead's hero, Howard Rourke, quote, he has learned long ago, with his first consciousness, two things which dominate his entire attitude toward life: his own superiority and the utter worthlessness of the world. In the original version of her first novel, We the Living, she wrote, what are your masses of humanity but mud to be ground underfoot, fuel to be burned for those who deserve it? Phew, amazing. Paul Ryan, now this is from a piece by Mark Ames titled How Ayn Rand Became a Big Admirer of Serial Killer William Hickman. Paul Ryan, that's Congressman Paul Ryan, Republican Congressman Paul Ryan, read Ayn Rand and declared with pride, quote, Rand makes the best case for the morality of democratic capitalism. Right, except that Ayn Rand despised democracy. Ayn Rand wrote, and I quote, democracy, in short, is a form of collectivism which denies individual rights. The majority can do whatever it wants with no restrictions. In principle, the democratic government is all-powerful. Democracy is a totalitarian manifestation. It is not a form of freedom. As Michelle Bachmann said, quote, as much as the collectivist says to each according to his ability, to each according to his need, that's not how mankind is wired. They want to make the best possible deal for themselves. And thus you have the Libertarian Party, whose platform in 1980 says, and you know, by and large to this day, although they've cleaned up their language a lot so that the useful idiots, particularly those who say, well, you know, I don't like Donald Trump and I don't like Hillary Clinton, so I think I'm going to vote third party. Let's check out the Libertarians. And they read the party platform, and they really, you know, it says something like, you know, well, individual liberty and freedom from government taking your money, or words that really what they're saying is cut taxes for billionaires, right? So here's the 1980 Libertarian Party platform. We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs. Keep in mind, this is Bill Weld and Gary Johnson. Now, why is it that this list that I'm giving you was not being read by Anderson Cooper when he introduced them on CNN? Why is it that none of these were even questioned? Let me continue. We oppose any compulsory insurance or tax-supported plan to provide health services, including those which finance abortion services. We also favor the deregulation of the medical insurance industry. Right, just let them throw you off the policy when you get sick. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. Pending that repeal, participation in Social Security should be made voluntary. We propose the abolition of the governmental postal system. We oppose all personal and corporate income taxation, including capital gains taxes. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. As an interim measure, all civil and criminal laws against tax evasion should be terminated immediately. We support repeal of all laws which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws. Why didn't Anderson Cooper ask about this stuff? Why doesn't anybody ask about this stuff? Why do Gary Johnson and Bill Weld get a pass every single time they're in the media? We advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children and interfere with the free choice of individuals. Government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. How come nobody has asked the libertarians about this? Why is it that, you know, I mean, you've got Hillary Clinton saying, we want to make college free for young people. You've got libertarians saying, end all government support of colleges, period, and schools. Forget about kindergarten. Forget about fifth grade. Forget about high school. Forget about going to college. It ain't going to happen unless you happen to have, you know, made your money the old-fashioned way, inherited it like Donald Trump did. We condemn compulsory education laws, and we call for an immediate repeal of such laws. We support the repeal of all taxes on income or property of private schools, whether profit or nonprofit. In other words, a for-profit private school should not have to pay property taxes or income taxes. Right. Are you starting to get the idea? We support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency, which makes life tough for Koch Industries. You know, I get it. David Koch is running for vice president on this platform. We support abolition of the Department of Energy. We call for the dissolution of all government agencies concerned with transportation, including the Department of Transportation. Yeah, we don't need no stinking FAA. Those air traffic controllers, the billionaires can replace them easy. After all, I mean, you don't even really need them when you've got a private jet, right? You just hop in your private jet and fly someplace. I'm only halfway through this list. We favor the repeal of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. We call for the abolition of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. We support the repeal of all state usury laws. Usury is charging illegally high levels of interest. We call for the privatization of all the inland waterways, all of America's rivers.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Yeah, let's just privatize the Mississippi and Columbia rivers. Sure, you know, Koch Industries or GE, they could do such a better job of running these rivers.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.